Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners.
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are glad that you're joining us this week. Christy has got a doozy of a case for us.
I really do. I have to start by saying that I was recently looking at our analytics for the podcast, and I made a surprising discovery. I didn't even tell Melissa about this yet.
What did you discover?
I believe that since starting our podcast a few years ago, the city where we have received the most listens from has always stayed the same. As many of you know, Melissa and I live in a small Canadian town. The city where we get the most listens from is about a 45-minute drive away from us. Knowing this, you can imagine my surprise when I discovered that the number one spot for listeners had changed.
What?
Mm-hmm.
We've branched out?
We really have. We still have a lot of people listening from the city close to us, but that number one spot was recently taken by a city far across the pond. So it's not even from the most listened to country, which is the United States.
Oh, that is interesting.
It is.
Okay, Christy, hurry up and tell me.
We are excited to extend a very special thank you to Dublin, Ireland, for supporting us by listening to our little podcast.
Aw, thanks, guys.
Yes.
That's awesome, actually.
Isn't it? You are miles away from us, but close to our hearts. The only way to express our gratitude is by bringing you a case from your hometown.
I always think it's so funny when we do this.
I know, but how else can we say thank you than to tell you about your own dirtbags? So if you live in Dublin, this case is for you. And if you don't, it's still for you. We honestly appreciate each and every one of you so very much, wherever you are listening from. And if you want to become our most listened from city, please recommend us to your true crime loving friends.
Shameless plug.
Yep. But I was really surprised and delighted when I saw that, because that other city has held the number one spot since we started. When I went researching for cases from Dublin, I was not expecting to find the case that I did. It is a case that I hadn't heard about prior to researching it. Often, Melissa and I discuss in great detail how the mental health of a dirtbag can lead them to commit absolutely heinous crimes. That is definitely the case today. But this case also lends an interesting perspective on how a person's mental state can lead them to become a perfect victim for a person searching out the most vulnerable. Please know that I am in no way blaming today's victim. She did not deserve what happened to her. On the contrary, she suffered so much during her life and deserved to be lifted up and supported by someone who loved and cared for her. We are going to be discussing sensitive material today, involving pushing past the limits of BDSM, as well as self-harm. Cases like this can be uncomfortable to talk about, but are just as important to bring awareness to.
Absolutely.
I'm going to start by telling you about the victim in this horrible case. In 1976, Elaine O'Hara was born in Dublin, Ireland, on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th.
Oh, that's awesome.
I thought that was really amazing. I wonder if they would get special things from their government like our New Year's babies do. I think they should. You're a political leader in Ireland. I think you should take that under advisement.
They would almost always have the biggest birthday bashes, though.
Wouldn't it be amazing to celebrate? I think so. Elaine's loving parents were Frank and Eileen, both of whom tried to give her a loving childhood. I think Elaine had at least one sister, but I'm unsure if she had more siblings. Elaine attended a private all-girls Catholic school in Dublin called St. Joseph of Cluny Secondary School. As Elaine entered her teenage years, mental health issues seemed to become more evident. As a young teen, her best friend was killed in a car accident.
Oh.
After that, it was said that she was bullied by the other children. It was actually reported that she didn't have any friends. Because of the relentless teasing and harassment from the other kids, Elaine understandably preferred to be alone. Although this is understandable, it did begin her lifelong struggle with feeling isolated and uncared for.
Such a vicious cycle.
When Elaine was around the age of 12, she began to envision a quote-unquote play in her head over and over again. In this scene, she would be restrained and undergo punishment for being a less than or unworthy person. So she became fixated on this situation of being tied up and punished because she felt that that's what she deserved.
Was she having like actual hallucinations of this?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. It was just a reoccurring thought.
Yeah. Like a daydream in her mind, but that she would continue to see over and over.
Right. Intrusive thoughts.
Yes, that's the word. Depression set in, followed by self-harming behaviors. Throughout her teen years, Elaine would make attempts at taking her own life and would spend time hospitalized in different psychiatric units. The first occurrence that I read about her attempting to end her life was at the tender age of 16. Elaine had cut her wrists. Elaine's parents tried to find her help. Elaine was medicated, and Frank would later say that his daughter lost a good portion of her late teens and young adult life to medication. Professor Anthony Clare, who was also a doctor, diagnosed Elaine with depression and borderline personality disorder. In very simple terms, borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder characterized by severe mood swings, impulsive behavior, and difficulty forming stable personal relationships. Elaine was also diagnosed with dyslexia, diabetes, and asthma. And I will note that psychosis was ruled out as a condition of Elaine's. And I'll also note that despite having asthma, Elaine would go on to become a very heavy smoker at times. So she would have an issue with her breathing.
Okay. So she wasn't making the best health choices.
She wasn't. But she was also up against a lot. I feel like sometimes when we're talking about all of this type of thing happening, we're usually talking about the dirtbag, not the victim. That's what I think makes this so interesting and so important to talk about. She was really trying. I think it just made her vulnerable. Professor Clare treated Elaine for 16 years. Elaine's mental health declined even further when her mother, Eileen, passed away on March 2nd, 2002. She was only 52 years old at the time of her death. In 2005, according to Professor Clare's notes, Elaine told him, quote, "I wasn't born for life. No one likes me. I'm a bad person." Hence the feeling like she needed to be punished. Elaine had also made comments to Professor Clare indicating that she disliked being a girl and sometimes felt like she'd rather be a boy. That being said, it didn't really sound like she was feeling that she was male or wanting to undergo any type of transitioning. Just, I wish I didn't have to deal with being a woman. I wish I could be a man. Wanting to make sure nothing was missed medically for Elaine, Professor Clare asked Dr. Margaret Griffin to help assess any issues that could be present for Elaine. Dr. Griffin was an endocrinologist who specialized in treating gland issues. Elaine saw the doctor in November of 2006. It was determined that her testosterone levels were within a typical range, but it was noted that Elaine was sexually disturbed and more masculine.
Sexually disturbed how?
Well, we're going to get into it.
Okay. Is there any indication of where these thoughts came from? That she wasn't good enough?
No.
And that she had to be punished?
No, and this started right from the age of 12 that she started to feel that way. But I think it came from losing her only friend in that car accident, so feeling alone, and then being relentlessly bullied at school. She really did not have another friend at school.
And from those, she felt like she needed to be punished.
I think she began believing what the bullies were telling her, that she was worthless, there was nothing good about her.
And that escalated into that thought that because of all these things, she needed to be punished for it.
I think so.
Okay.
I think she struggled already with her self-esteem, which a lot of young children do around that age. That's right when puberty's starting. We can all kind of go through that bit of an identity crisis. And she just felt like she wasn't measuring up. And because of that, she felt like, because I'm so terrible, people should just hurt me.
Okay.
Things slid further downhill for Elaine when Professor Anthony Clare passed away in October of 2007. She had now lost 2 parts of her already small support system, him and her mother. After Professor Clare passed away, Elaine began seeing Dr. Matt Murphy. To say that Elaine had a rocky road would be an understatement. Between the years of 1992 and 2012, Elaine had been admitted to St. Edmundsbury Hospital in Lucan 14 times for mental health-related concerns. It averaged out to be close to every 18 months or so. There are 3 official recordings of Elaine attempting suicide. The most serious ones took place in 2005 and 2006. The one that happened in 2006 resulted in Elaine being in a coma for 24 hours afterwards. Despite her medical challenges, Elaine was able to work in childcare. It was said that she was a hard worker, but that she did talk openly to her colleagues regarding her mental health struggles and self-harming behaviors. Many of her coworkers thought that she said these things more to shock them than out of truth. They didn't really know quite how to take her.
Okay. But she's talking about them. She's not hiding them.
No, she's not, which is good. In 2005, at the age of 29, Elaine moved out of her father's home and moved into a garage renovated to be a flat in Black Rock. She moved to a different flat in Black Rock 3 years later before being able to secure an affordable housing unit in Bellarmine Plaza in Stepaside. It may have seemed like Elaine was doing better. She was living independently, she was working as a child care assistant in Ballybrack, as well as part-time in a newsagent in Black Rock. She was also taking night classes to become a Montessori teacher, which I believe focuses on individualized learning. Although she was making some advancements mentally and physically, Elaine was still struggling. Her medical records recorded at this time that she, quote, lives a very lonely life with no friends and finds it very difficult to trust people. Throughout the years, the play that I mentioned earlier continued to play out in Elaine's mind on repeat. The play where she would be bound and tortured as discipline.
So how is that different than negative self-talk? Or do you think that's what it was?
I think she was actually envisioning it, watching it in her mind play out. But very similar to intrusive or negative self-talk. She probably honestly had that as well. Possibly searching for relief and wanting to bring this play to fruition, Elaine turned to the internet for answers. Starting in 2006, Elaine created a profile on the fetish website alt.com. And I'm sure there were other sites as well, just this one pertained more so to the case. Elaine used what was described as a graphic photograph of herself in her profile picture. She stated that she was a 36-year-old female who loved to be in chains and serving a master. But I will point out that the 36-year-old part was at the time of her death, not when she started her profile.
Okay.
She stated that she, quote, still has a lot to learn. This claim was reiterated by her profile name, which was Help Me Learn. Elaine made it known that she wanted to be subservient and had someone dominate over her. This website that she was using clearly targeted members of the BDSM community. We have covered cases that involve BDSM before, but to refresh your memory, BDSM stands for bondage, discipline or domination, sadism, and masochism as a type of sexual practice.
It's interesting that she is now almost turning that negative thought in her head into a fantasy.
Yes. Along the lines of, I can actually make this happen.
But it's something that if this was a play or a negative thing playing over and over in your mind, it's something that you wouldn't want to happen. But now it's totally twisted into something that she wants to happen.
Yes.
That is very interesting.
So I wonder if so much repeat exposure, you know, how you become desensitized to something, where maybe even that play became a comfort thing that she would go to because it's a repeating thing.
Right. Or do you think it might have had something to do with if she made herself an active or willing participant in it, then she could convince herself that she wasn't the victim in the situation.
True. By choosing to be the victim, she had some control.
That's right.
Possibly. That's an interesting thought for sure. BDSM, though, should be a safe experience between two trusting adults. There are usually individualized agreements made beforehand, which include safe words and rules.
Right. That's what makes it BDSM okay versus abuse.
Exactly. So there definitely has to be a line drawn in the sand and a lot of open communication and trust between two people who want to do this.
Right.
On this site, Elaine expressed that she sought after a master who would be, quote, honest, loyal, frank, and trustworthy, possibly caring as well. To describe what she was into, Elaine's profile listed, quote, bondage, collar and leads or leashes, kidnapping, knife play, mummification, sensory deprivation, spanking, slap in the face, and verbal humiliation. And I just want to point out to remember that Elaine felt like she was not worthy and deserved to hurt.
Mummification is an interesting one.
Yeah, I decided not to go down that rabbit hole because I didn't know if that was a sexual thing or what that actually meant. Because I don't think she actually wanted to be turned into a mummy.
but she wanted to be smothered. I guess you really won't know because she's not here and we can't ask her, but
No.
I'm curious if that is the actual sensation she was seeking after.
Maybe.
Just being covered all over? Interesting.
Because she also had said sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
So maybe. I was just a little worried at what might come up on my computer if I Googled what is mummification in terms of BDSM. I didn't do it. Sorry, guys. You can and let us know. Or maybe just keep it to yourself. I don't know.
Interesting. It's not one that you typically hear.
No.
Yeah.
And if it is to wrap yourself up, that would be horrifying to me. I would feel so claustrophobic.
But so many times, especially with people that enjoy sensory deprivation, like a tight hug is soothing.
Right. Or like a weighted blanket, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard that one before. Now you piqued my curiosity.
Yeah, I hadn't either, actually.
It might be in my search engine soon.
Okay, well, you can let me know. I bet by time we break for lunch, I will have this information. So although Elaine had all of this on her profile, most men were not willing to fulfill Elaine's needs completely. That being said, it would not take long before her profile would attract a dirtbag who was more than willing to do everything on her list and then some. Cue the entry of Mr. Graham Dwyer. It is believed that Elaine and Graham met sometime in 2008, and he would ultimately take her life against her will 4 years later in 2012. So let me tell you about Graham before we talk about him and Elaine together. Graham Dwyer was born on September 21st, 1972, in Bandon County, Cork, to Susan and Sean Dwyer. He has an older sister, Mandy, and 2 younger brothers, Brendan and James. The family lived in Deer Park in Bandon and were said to be good and friendly neighbors. Graham was described in almost an opposite manner from Elaine. He was said to be easygoing, outgoing, and was well-liked. He had no problem making friends. Described as a gentleman, during his teenage years, Graham worked weekends on a chicken farm. He was part of the scouting program, he loved music, and even played bass in a band with classmates from Hamilton High School and Bandon Grammar School. The band's name that he played in was Strange Ways. This name was inspired by a group named The Smiths and their album, Strange Ways, Here We Come. This album was sort of a tribute to the infamous Manchester prison.
An interesting tribute.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many interesting things, Christy.
There is, and I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard about this case before. Honestly, you could go down a lot of rabbit holes with this one. Graham was a popular kid in school and was said to do very well with the ladies. It sounds like it was not hard for him to find girls willing to date him. In 1991, when he would have been around the age of 19, Graham decided to fly the coop to study architecture at Dublin Institute of Technology, or DIT, Bolton Street. Around this time of branching out, Graham became romantically involved with a woman named Emma Roche. It sounded like they were both in college at the time and met through school. Not too long into their relationship, Emma became pregnant. She gave birth to the couple's son in 1992. Both Emma and the son she shared with Graham would later testify against him at his murder trial. Later, Graham would actually send a birthday card to his son talking about how, I'm going to get off of this. Like, I'm not going to get sent to prison.
He wouldn't be held accountable.
Yeah, she killed herself. It wasn't me. And I'm not worried.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was actually used against him later. But I imagine that it wouldn't have been very easy for his son to testify against him.
Not at all.
That was really courageous of him for doing that.
Do you know how old his son was?
Well, he was born in 1992, and so he would have been around 20. Emma would tell the courts that during her relationship with Graham, he shared his dark and twisted fantasies with her. He admitted that he wanted to stab a woman during the act of sex. For obvious reasons, Emma was not up to being stabbed while getting intimate with the father of her son. However, after a while, Graham was able to convince her to let him bring a knife into the bedroom during the act.
Ooh.
At first, he was enthralled just having it in the same room while engaging. But then he would pretend to stab Emma during their sexual encounters. She said he never actually stabbed her, but essentially he got off on pretending, and even just at the idea of it.
Hey, that's interesting.
Yep. And so I do want to point out that the act or interest in stabbing, sticking, or otherwise penetrating the skin with sharp objects, think knives, pins, or nails, is referred to as piquerism. This is not the same thing as BDSM.
Piquerism?
Yeah.
Okay.
Piquerism. Piquerism. And that's not a typical part of BDSM. So this is beyond.
Okay.
I just wanted to point that out so people don't get confused that, oh no, I heard Barry Motive said that people who do BDSM like to stab each other. No, not true.
Okay, so I am right to assume that even this is a little bit odd, even for BDSM?
Yes, it's not part of BDSM.
Okay, because I'm thinking, I have never heard this one either.
No. I think a little bit of knife play can be involved in BDSM, but not to this extreme. When it's piquerism, you actually want to stab and penetrate the skin. You want there to be blood, not just scratches.
I think Amber was pretty brave.
Yes, because how unnerving would this be? How afraid would you be that he wouldn't just get carried away in the moment, lose control, and stab you?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I don't know that if I would get very turned on by seeing my partner being turned on by pretending to stab me. I mean, you do you, boo, but that would be a little unnerving because in just a split moment, you could cross that line.
Right.
Emma might have been trying to appease her partner at the beginning, but I know that this won't come as a huge shock to anyone listening. But eventually, the young couple broke things off. She was like, this really isn't for me. So I think it was pushing that boundary for her.
She wasn't feeling it.
No. In 1996, when their son would have been around 4 years old, the couple split. But it did sound like he stayed in his son's life. Was still a decent father. I didn't read anything that would suggest otherwise. In 1997, Graham began dating Gemma Healy, the daughter of a well-known surgeon. Gemma was also career-oriented and studying to become an architect. The two together were almost viewed as a power couple. Graham graduated in 1997 with a 2.1 degree in architecture. He became an associated member of the Royal Institute of Architects of Ireland in 1998 and a full member in 2001. This sounds like it was quite the accomplishment for someone as young as he was at the time. This was actually pretty prestigious. After working for a few other offices, Graham was hired at A&D, Wetshirt and Partners Architects, on July 2nd, 2001. The company was located on Lower Bagot Street. He became an associate in the company in 2003 and continued his studies part-time to complete a master's in urban design.
So you can kind of see where his ego would come in.
Oh, definitely, because he was highly revered in his field. After getting married in 2002, Gemma and Graham purchased an artesian cottage in Dublin and renovated it together. The home was so spectacular that it was featured in the Irish Times.
Be awesome. Two architects?
Yes. I assume that Graham and likely Gemma designed the cottage together. He had also designed a bathroom for a television series at the time called Beyond the Hall Door. Gemma would also end up testifying at Graham's trial. She stated that he loved to fly model airplanes and was really good with computers. Gemma also spoke of Graham's love of cars. He had previously owned a Porsche, but when he was arrested, he drove a Land Rover Discovery Jeep and an Audi. So needless to say, the couple were living quite comfortably. After 5 years of marriage, the couple moved to Carrymount Close, Foxrock. Graham was named director at the company in June of 2006 and worked on a lot of noteworthy projects. Some of those include the Carlow Institute of Technology and Leopardstown Racecourse. He even traveled to Poland quite frequently to do some work. The Dwyer couple were living well. Gemma liked to sail, and Graham spent his time driving his cars and flying his model planes. This all eventually changed. Graham is quoted explaining his troubles. Quote, "I was deeply in debt. We had good prospects in 2007. We had a cottage in Rathmines, bought the house in Foxrock to renovate. Then the crash happened. Gemma lost her job and I had huge pay cuts." And I think his pay was actually cut in half. I assume from the economic crash in 2008. But as a result, the couple were living on about a quarter of their income.
We often think that we were the only ones affected in 2008, but it was worldwide.
It was. And Graham and Gemma were hit hard. To go from a very lavish lifestyle to now down to a quarter of what you're used to would be hard.
So difficult.
It would.
Especially when you're not used to it.
Yes. And neither of them had ever had to struggle financially. Not growing up and not together.
Which would just make it that much more of a shock.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Some of you haven't lived off cheese with sandwiches, and it shows. By this time, the couple had 2 children together, and Graham needed to provide for his family. However, this family guy wasn't the man who everyone around him thought he was. His fantasies hadn't just gone away after dating Emmer and marrying Gemma. In fact, they had just gotten darker and more sinister. And when he finally met Elaine O'Hara, his obsession would turn deadly.
You can almost see this building because now there's this big, powerful guy that's used to power. He has all these fantasies already. And now you take away his power and his position and his pride. And now he has to assert dominance over something.
Yes, it was definitely a perfect storm. I agree. You could just see this happening. And he had moved up really quickly. I think he was hired in 2001, and by 2005 or 6, he was the director. So he was used to things going really well for him. It was just unfortunate that he came across Elaine's profile, who was asking for the things that he was wanting to give. And I will note that it sounded like Gemma was unaware of her husband's twisted and violent fantasies. I think after that had hurt his relationship with Emmer, he chose to keep that from his wife.
Oh, that tracks.
Yeah, from his perspective, you could see why he wouldn't tell her.
Mm-hmm.
Graham was looking for someone to hurt during sex, and Elaine was looking for someone to punish her. When they discovered one another's profiles on the fetish site, it was a match made in somewhere a lot hotter than heaven. Sadly, Graham would see Elaine's profile and take advantage of her seeking someone to, quote-unquote, help her learn. This would be an indicator that Elaine was not completely familiar with the ins and outs of the BDSM community, and therefore could be easier to manipulate into fulfilling his sick wishes.
He purposely chose her because of that?
That is what it is assumed.
Okay.
Because if you are a thriving member of the BDSM community, you know those rules. You know what the boundaries are. You know that piquerism is not part of BDSM.
Right.
And so when he sees Elaine's profile saying, I want someone to be my master and help me learn, teach me these things, he's probably thinking jackpot.
Okay.
It's an assumption.
Okay, gotcha. I was like, oh, what evidence did they find that he chose her just because of that?
No, but I think you can connect those dots pretty easily.
Okay.
After meeting on the fetish site, Graham and Elaine would communicate via email to begin with. Graham, who used the profile name Architect72, used the email address fetishboy@gmail.com. And Elaine's email was submissive391@gmail.com. Police would later be able to examine thousands of emails, site messages, and text messages between Graham and Elaine to help piece together what happened between them and what went terribly wrong.
Poor tech people.
Oh, there was thousands of them, and I went through a lot of them, and I'm going to share some, but I just couldn't share all of them, nor could I even get my hands on all of them, or wanted to be honest. But there was a lot of different ways that they were communicating, and they had secret phones as well that they used to communicate with one another.
Why would Elaine need a secret phone? She's not living with anybody. She's not in a relationship with anybody.
Oh, her master gave it to her. He had the master phone and she had the slave phone.
Okay.
He was very worried that people would find out about him, to be honest, which we will talk about. Which makes me think that his plans were sinister, probably right from the start. Along with the written correspondence, the police were later also able to obtain some pretty graphic homemade sex videos made by the couple. It was clear that starting in 2008, Graham and Elaine began a sexual relationship that involved some knife play and bondage. So it was starting off more mild, compared to where it escalates to. We don't have to go into all of the details, but as Graham and Elaine grew closer, she opened up to him about her suicide attempts. In his message to Elaine, Graham wrote, quote, I am a sadist. I enjoy others' pain. You should help me inflict pain on you and help me with my fantasy. He also wrote, quote, I want to stick my knife in flesh while I am turned on. Blood turns me on, and I would love to stab a girl to death sometime. While she's opening up about attempts on her own life, he's like, yeah, I would like to kill somebody. Being the sleazy dirtbag that he is, Graham decided to exploit the fact that Elaine struggled with her mental health, going as far to say, quote, if you ever want to die, promise me I can do it. To which Elaine answered, yes, I promise, sir. and she called him sir all the time in her text messages. But what a dirtbag to do this.
He is exploiting her.
He absolutely is. When I read this, it made my stomach turn. Instead of trying to help Elaine, he wanted to take advantage of an already bad situation. He is total trash. I do have to question if this made Elaine nervous, if she felt it deep down that something was off with Graham. I question this because after promising Graham that he could end her life for her if she decided she wanted to end things, she made sure to express to him that she was not suicidal and did not want to die. She's like, okay, well, if I decide, sure, but I really don't want to die. His response was that he would wait for her. He said, quote, I'll have everything ready if it becomes too much. Just think, all your worries gone.
So now he's trying to talk her into it.
Yes. He later also wrote to Elaine, quote, my urge to rape, stab, or kill is huge. You have to help me control or satisfy. He's totally manipulating her.
Because now she's probably developed feelings for him.
Yes. And it sounds like he was the first man willing to go to the extremes that she was wanting to go to as well.
It would be curious to see if this scratched her itch. Like, did this role playing actually give her more confidence, that she stopped having that play in her head and became a more confident person in other aspects of her life? Like, did it meet her needs?
I think it did to begin with, to be honest, because there are times, which we will talk about, that she was able to stand up to him. She did break it off with him a few times. They were basically on again, off again for 4 years.
But does that mean that she was more confident, or does that mean that she was fearful of him?
I interpret it as that she was more confident because before that, she just felt like she deserved to be hurt and used and trampled on. That's what that play was. She had to be punished. So if you're thinking you're worthless and just need to be hurt by everybody, you're not going to stand up for yourself.
Okay.
So to me, that seems like a shift.
Right.
I can't speak for Elaine, obviously.
Right. But people around her weren't noticing a change in her behavior. Like all of a sudden she was happier, controlling herself more, or like presenting herself in a more positive light.
Near the end, they were.
So it seems like it was fulfilling some of her needs.
I think it was. And I think at the end, and maybe that's why things escalated for Graham, is he could see her slipping away. She was putting in more boundaries.
Right.
She was starting to feel happier. She was starting to do things in her life to make positive changes.
But it would almost be like, oh, this is actually working, so I have to keep doing it. Like from her perspective.
Yeah, possibly.
And that's why I have to keep him happy. Like he's actually making me happy for the first time in my life. I should keep him happy. Like it would almost entrench her more to him.
It could be just this awful
go round that you can't get off of.
Yes.
Nightmare.
Yeah, definitely. You can see how one would feed into the other.
Mm-hmm. Carousel never stops, Christy.
Jump off. Later, when the news reported that a woman had been stabbed, Graham wrote to Elaine, quote, I'm watching the case with interest. Big mistake leaving a witness. I would have loved to have stabbed her. I can imagine the knife going in and out. Would have loved to have been the one killing her. Lucky guy. He also, quote, I am going to do it. You have to help me or it will be you. You can't see, but Melissa's shaking her head.
This is wild.
It is.
I'm always shocked when people tell you who they are and we don't pay attention.
Right. Or you think, oh, no, it'll be okay.
Yeah, they're just joking. They don't really mean those things that they're just saying.
Yeah.
He's telling her exactly who he is.
I know. Unfortunately, she has not had the same social interactions throughout her life. She had that one friend that passed away, and that was really it.
Right. And she probably feels alienated from any of her support systems.
Yep. She really just had her dad. I think she had a sister. I'm not sure, but she did not have a big support system.
And often those relationships, when you have mental health issues, can be really strained. So your support system is less.
For sure. So I can see why she would be holding on to Graham.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout their relationship, Graham would push the boundaries and coerce Elaine into doing more and more things that she wasn't comfortable with and really didn't want to do. Eventually, Graham was able to talk Elaine into letting him bring a knife into their sexual relationship. He started with knife play, which typically involves things like cutting away clothing or making small scratches on the skin. But this wasn't enough for Graham. He pushed Elaine until she allowed him to begin cutting her and making small stabs into her flesh. She had lots of marks on her stomach area. Although Graham seemed to have a hold over Elaine, she was able to stand up to him at times, and she would put a stop to their relationship for a time. So they would be, like I said, on again, off again. One of those off again times was in July of 2011. After 3 years together, Elaine mustered the courage to tell Graham, quote, "I'm not into blood anymore." She said, "I don't want you to stab me." When Graham asked Elaine what would happen if he did stab her, she told him probably nothing, but that it would likely set back her recovery. She was still seeking treatment for her suicidal ideations.
Which he would care nothing about.
No, he would encourage. Selfishly, he told her that she, quote, should regard it as something I want. She was his submissive, and he seemed to think that this meant she had to let him do whatever he wanted, regardless of what her opinion was.
I'm curious, had Graham already had other relationships that involved BDSM? Or was this his first relationship too? And maybe he wasn't aware of, like, there's rules and there's certain, I don't want to say protocols, but there's certain things that we do and there's certain things that we don't do.
You know what? I'm not 100% sure on that.
Because maybe he had this skewed vision of what BDSM was too.
He could have. That's a good point. I didn't even think of that.
It doesn't sound like he's following any of the kind of prescribed rules.
Right. But I don't know if that's what drove him to Elaine, because maybe he had tried out the BDSM community, knew that this was not going to fly, and so he was not going to let her go.
Right. That's why I would be curious to see if he had had other relationships prior to this.
I didn't find any information saying he did or didn't.
Okay.
My guess is that he probably did, but I don't know that. It does seem pretty apparent that Graham was thinking about killing Elaine for a long time before it actually happened. In October of 2011, he asked her, quote, "If anything happens to you, who knows about me?" She responded by saying that no one really knew about him, but that people knew she was into BDSM. He responded, quote, "Okay, let's keep it that way."
What? Red flag, red flag.
Totally. And I think that even this year prior, he for sure was starting to feel like, I'm just making sure no one knows that I'm with her, so that if I kill her, it won't be pointing to me.
Right. And even his comments about the other stabbing, he's already thinking, how do I get away with it?
Yes.
Shows his ego.
He is such a dirtbag. I didn't find any redeeming qualities about this one, you guys. Elaine explained to Graham that she wanted to have a child and couldn't do that full of stab wounds. She said, quote, "I will miss you, sir. If I was ever to find anyone and have kids, I need to be free of stabs. Unless you are willing to give me a child, sir." I read in a few reports that Graham's response to Elaine telling him that she wanted a baby was that he would agree to impregnate her if she helped him find someone else to stab to death during sex. Allegedly, Elaine offered up a person who was close to her and her family. I won't say who exactly because I couldn't confirm the claim. The assumption is that Elaine agreed to help set up another woman to be entrapped by Graham, and in return, he'd help her get pregnant so she could become a mother. Either way, if it's true or not, it did not last very long, because Elaine was said to not be able to go through with it. My assumption is perhaps she felt coerced by Graham and agreed to appease him, but in actuality, she did not want to trade someone else's life for a child. But it did seem like Graham believed that if Elaine didn't give him her life to take, she owed him that help in giving him someone else, like a sacrificial offer.
Such an interesting dynamic.
It's just getting more and more twisted. Elaine's mental health suffered while she was with Graham. In July of 2012, Elaine, being extremely depressed, decided to check herself into St. Edmundsbury. She had acquired a noose and was contemplating using it to hang herself. Deep down, Elaine did want to live, and that is why she made the attempts to help herself by getting professional help. Once at the hospital, Elaine began to once again improve. Although her report would state that she was lonely, it was said that she had a supportive dad, but no friends. Despite feeling isolated, all involved agreed that Elaine was doing better with treatment this time around. By the time she would leave, around 6 weeks later, she was described as cheerful and spontaneous.
So sad. She was actually getting better.
She was. This was the best she had ever been. One of the women at St. Edmundbury said after seeing the cut marks on Elaine's stomach that, quote, "Elaine just wanted to be loved. She just wanted some attention." This woman warned Elaine that she was playing a very dangerous game. Unfortunately, despite having broken things off with Graham, Elaine was still in contact with him, even while at the hospital. To do this, she had 2 phones, one of which she messaged with Graham. It was during this final stay that he made sure to tell her not to tell anyone about him.
So he had made up his mind.
I believe so. Soon before Elaine was discharged from the hospital, Graham told her that she would be punished and they would have to pretend to do someone for real. I assume meaning acting out stabbing someone to death, that they would have to act this out. On August 16th, 2012, Graham texted Elaine and told her that he had been hiking up the Dublin mountains and saw plenty of lonely walkers. He said they just needed to find a route back without cameras and they would be sorted. He also said that he was very excited. The next day, Graham messaged, quote, "We go into the woods, I take off your clothes, stab you, bury you, and leave your clothes in the car near the sea at night. Looks like you drowned."
Building this fantasy.
He really is. So he's telling her, I want to play this out.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what he's actually going to do.
But it's just getting more and more detailed every time. He's escalating.
Absolutely. And becoming more and more obsessed with this. Just 5 days after this ominous message, Elaine would disappear. The early afternoon of August 22nd, Graham instructed Elaine to leave her iPhone and just bring her slave phone and keys. From the messages, it is believed that Elaine thought that they would just be acting out Graham's fantasy. It is not believed that she knew he was actually going to do the things that he told her about. Elaine was last seen on August 22nd, 2012, and just over a year later, on September 13th, 2013, her skeletal remains would be found by a dog walker on Killikee Mountain, just south of Dublin. The dogs had found some bones, but the woman walking the dogs did not suspect that they were human remains. They were out in the mountains, and it would not be unusual to find animal bones there. The dogs had plenty of times. However, when her own dog began scratching at the ground, she took a closer look and noticed what looked like track pants and a shoe inside one of the legs. The dogs were finding bigger bones, which made the woman nervous. She contacted the owner of the land, and they went back to the spot together to further investigate, because I believe the spot that she found the remains was not open to the public. But the owner of that area gave her keys because she would walk, I think, 4 to 6 dogs, maybe even up to 8 sometimes. So they had this agreement that she could go there and walk the dogs. So when she found this, she's like, I need to tell him.
So creepy.
It was at this time, when they went back to look together, that they noticed a jawbone and decided to call the Gardaí, which is the Irish police. When the police arrived, they also found a knife blade sticking out of the ground. With this discovery, the landowner let the police know that he had found some suspicious items while hunting with a friend between September 2011 and January 2012. These items included a large plastic sheet, Vaseline, string hanging from trees, plastic bags, and a stick that had nails sticking out of it. Items that suggested that these woods were not the first time that Graham had brought Elaine there. As this was before the murder, but he had found them and thought, oh, people are doing some kinky things in here.
Yeah, that's strange.
Uh-huh. Some of Elaine's items had been found just days prior to her body being discovered in a nearby location. 3 men had been on a bridge fishing the Vardy Reservoir in Wicklow on September 10th, 2013. The water levels were 18 feet below typical level because of the hot summer that Ireland had just gone through. They were usually about 20 feet deep, and it was only about 2 feet deep.
Oh, wow.
So it was a huge difference.
That is a dramatic difference.
Yes. Because of the low reservoir, these 3 men noticed something shiny and silver. The men were able to fish out clothing, rope, and handcuffs. At first, they left the items on the wall of the bridge. But the next day, one of the men decided to go back for the items and hand them in to the police. So at first, they're like, oh, what's this? Probably laughed about it. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't sit right with him. 3 days later, another one of the men went back to where they found the original items and was able to find a set of keys that had loyalty cards attached to them, one of which belonged to the store Dunes. When the store was contacted, they stated that the loyalty card that was found had belonged to Elaine O'Hara, the woman who had been missing for over a year.
Oh, that would be an eerie discovery. So this is the police searching them, or just citizens were able to find that information out?
I think the citizens were, and that's when he would turn this stuff in. They also found a leather mask, an inhaler, and remember that Elaine suffered with asthma, a chain with a metal ring around it, and more restraints. Elaine had gone missing just hours after being discharged from the hospital. It was reported that Elaine first went home to her place in Bellarmine. Next, she went to the pharmacy to fill a prescription. The pharmacist would later testify that she was in good spirits. After getting her meds, Elaine called the newsagent to let them know when she could work because she had also arranged to begin volunteer work at the Tall Ships Festival. Graham, as I said, would later try to claim that Elaine had killed herself, but these actions don't necessarily line up with someone wanting to end their life just moments later. You don't fill a prescription and call your work.
No, you don't make arrangements for the next day.
No. Her last known location was near Hongana Cemetery in South Dublin at around 5:45 p.m. She was spotted by a man out for a jog. Elaine was with her father at the cemetery. And a chilling fact, she was later buried in the cemetery where she had last been seen alive.
Ooh, that is creepy.
It is. And I would assume that they were there visiting her mother's grave, but I don't know that for sure. After being spotted at the cemetery, Elaine went back to her father's house and unknowingly ate her last meal with him. She was reported missing 2 days later by her family. Because of the amount of decomposition, Elaine had to be identified through dental records using her mandible, which is the lower jaw. Only 65 pieces of Elaine's skeleton were ever recovered. It is believed that the wildlife likely made off with the missing parts.
It's a natural thing to happen in nature. They're wild animals, but at the same time, it just seems so awful.
It does. It seems so wrong to only get 65 pieces of your loved one back. Police were able to connect Graham to Elaine due to the plethora of messages that they exchanged. However, it would not be an easy feat to prove that he murdered her. To start, police had to prove that Graham did have a physical relationship with Elaine. They were able to do this quite easily by testing semen stains on her mattress that matched Graham Dwyer's DNA. Investigators also collected blood samples from the mattress that matched Elaine. By the amount of blood, it is believed that Graham was grooming Elaine to normalize blood loss during their sexual activities.
So disturbing. That's how any groomer works for anything, right?
Yep. It would start with a little scratch and then escalate it to stab wounds and then death.
Make the abnormal seem normal.
Yep. And I think that's why it's important to talk about cases like this. Because sometimes when you're right in it, I think it could be hard to see that outside perspective.
It's easy to normalize.
Right. Police were also able to find footage of Graham repeatedly entering Elaine's apartment. They also found her secret slave phone with damning motive against Graham. Initially, Elaine's disappearance had been assumed a suicide, but after her remains were discovered, police were handling her death as a homicide.
Makes sense.
Graham wasn't looked at as a suspect prior because the 2 Nikita phones that they used as a slave and master phone had been dumped and then discovered later on October 7th, 2013. So even after her remains, they found these phones. If Ireland didn't have that heat wave that summer, this case probably would never have come to light. Mother Nature helped out with this one because the water levels were down. It's really remarkable because the 18 feet to lower the water,
that is
so
crazy.
Much. Yeah. Along with the phones, they found 2 phone batteries, glasses, sunglasses, and a rest sack, which I assume is a backpack. As we do know, these phones would prove motive, and the glasses found could be traced back to a frame sold to Elaine from Specsavers. Graham Dwyer was arrested and charged with murder. One of the unfortunate things about the trial was how much detail had to come out about Elaine's sex life and fetishes. Elaine's father even had to testify about details his daughter had revealed to him during an argument in 2008, when she told him she was seeing an architect who was married and who would do certain things to her after restraining her. And I chose not to share all of the spicy and unnerving details for her sake.
I'm sure it was one thing to have that conversation with your daughter, but then to have to testify and tell other people about it?
Yeah, I don't think that would have been something any father would want to have to do.
No.
I will point out some of the things that the prosecution argued. They stated that the evidence proved that Elaine's murder was planned and thought out, that Graham preyed on Elaine and used her low self-esteem to manipulate her into doing things that she didn't want to do. She had stated in their messages that she didn't want to be beaten or stabbed. Instead, she wanted love. She wanted companionship. She wanted a child. Graham lured her to the mountains and killed her, and then let everyone believe that she had killed herself. Like I said, had the summer heat not prevailed, he might have gotten away with it. I think he would have. Plus, the fact that Graham had tried to hide his tracks and discard evidence, like the phones, proved that he knew what he did was wrong and proved intent. The defense argued that Elaine was mentally ill and had taken her own life. They said that the things Graham said in the text messages and emails were nothing but a fantasy.
I don't think so.
And thankfully, neither did the jury. On March 27, 2015, Graham Dwyer was found guilty by a unanimous verdict. He was sentenced by Judge Tony Hunt to life imprisonment after saying that he agreed 110% with the jury's decision. After such a harrowing trial, the jury members were exempted from jury duty for a period of 30 years, so until 2045.
Why not just their whole life?
Right?
Like, oh, goodness, you have done your duty.
Mind you, 30 years is longer than a life sentence in Canada.
True.
But I bet if they did get called, they probably could get out of it if they said, no, I did this trial and really don't want to do another. Unsurprisingly, Graham did not take this verdict lying down and caused quite a stir in regards to cell phone laws in Ireland. It raised the question if the metadata should have been used from the phones. The argument was made that the retention of data was contrary to the EU privacy rights.
Give up your rights when you murder people.
That's what I think too. If you do want to go down a rabbit hole, you can Google this part of the case. I will give you just the Cliff Notes version. That's a lot. So stay with me for a couple sentences here. In 2018, the High Court ruled that the way the data from the cell phones was handled did go against privacy rights. The state appealed this decision and it went to the Supreme Court, which in turn referred it to the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, for a ruling. Near the end of 2021, the CJEU, Court of Justice of the European Union, declared that the retention of the mobile phone metadata was, quote, permitted only in the event of a threat to national security and not in criminal investigations. In April of 2022, the CJEU basically sent the case to the Court of Appeals in Ireland to determine if the data could be used in Graham Dwyer's case. By June of that same year, the government in Ireland was considering using emergency legislation to, quote, deal with the fallout from this trial. In March of 2023, Graham's appeal was dismissed by the Court of Appeals, and in July of 2024, so less than a year ago, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the mobile phone data evidence was admissible during the original trial. There is a chance that this might not be the case for future trials like this.
Because previously there was no ruling, but now there's a ruling on it.
Right, and it was going back and forth. Thankfully, though, the Supreme Court also stated that at the time of this decision, in July of 2024, Graham had exhausted all of his legal options and will be ordered to serve out his whole life sentence. So I apologize if I made that confusing. It was kind of confusing to research, but it does lend for quite the rabbit hole if that interests you.
That is an interesting aspect about the case.
Mm-hmm.
And about privacy laws.
Yes, because we do need privacy laws, but like you said, you kill someone, I don't know that you need your privacy protected.
Right, but you can't have cell phone companies keeping everybody's data just in case they do commit murder.
Exactly. Either way, I'm glad it stuck for this one.
It is interesting.
Because how scary it would be if he had gotten released over that.
Yeah, because we know sexually motivated murders are often the most difficult to reform from.
Almost impossible. Another fact that was confusing to me, and always will be, is that there is at least one woman fighting to be able to visit Graham in jail. This woman lives in Sligo. She started writing letters to Graham and eventually got barred from visiting him. And I'm not sure what happened to get her barred, but it was the prison officials that were like, you cannot come here, lady, anymore.
It's so disturbing to me.
Isn't it? I do not understand it. Especially just how extreme his actions were. Well, maybe I guess she was into piquerism too. I don't know.
Maybe.
I have no idea. This woman has remained anonymous, but has stated that she thinks it's unfair that she basically can't be with her man and wants to be able to at least resume their pen pal relationship. To which I say gross.
Well, it is interesting because Elaine might have made that same argument to her dad, who sounds like he had an issue with the relationship.
True. But when she said it's unfair that she can't go visit him, my thought was, I wonder if this woman ever has considered how fair it was to Elaine to be brutally killed in the woods and left in the wild for over a year. How fair was it to her family to assume that she had taken her own life when she had been viciously murdered? How fair is that? Elaine is greatly missed by her family. She did not deserve what Graham did to her. She was fighting for her life, and there was hope for her future. And that is the story of an evil sadist, sickly obsessed with piquerism, who preyed on a vulnerable woman to be able to live out his dark fantasy. The disgusting dirtbag, Graham Dwyer.
That is an interesting case, Christy, with so many different avenues for rabbit holes.
There really was.
How did you pick and choose?
It was hard, to be honest. It was hard even just to pick and choose what intimate details or things to put in here. So hopefully I did it justice. Again, we want to give a shout out to Dublin for being our most listened to city out of all of our listeners. But also thank you to everyone else for listening.
And we'll be back again next week.
So we hope you'll join us then.
See ya.
Bye. Okay, we're hanging on by a thread today, but we're going to test. Testing.
Still reading headlines.
Stop reading the headlines.
I can't, Christy.
I know.
I just can't.
Well,
she cracks her voice.
I know. I didn't mean to.
That's the day it is.
We still have a lot of people listening. What's wrong with my voice? I've been talking fine. For support. Step Aside, such a great name.
Step Aside.
Step Aside. I'm coming in.
I move my mic.
Actually, they say that a goldfish has a longer attention span than a human does now. Because I think theirs is like 20 seconds or something. Yeah. And we have less. Penetrating the skin with sharp object. That
was the best noise ever.
I'm feeling 4 hours sleep, Melissa. I can do it. The police were later also along with the
That's usually me.
I know. I feel like I have a mouthful of marbles.
That's usually me. So that's why I'm laughing.
From the messages, it is believed that Mother Nature's like, let me show you.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.